What's up, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the BAMcast. I'm your host, Baker Shields, and it's my goal to help you to learn, grow, and evolve by any means necessary. Today, we have an extra special treat. We've got Shaun Vasquez. You might remember him from my episodes with Alfonso Lopez or Kevin Wilhite. Both of them mentioned Shaun, and Shaun played a huge role in their journeys as entrepreneurs, but also in mine. Shaun's been a mentor to me the past few years since knowing him, and we met on a random day several years ago that you'll kind of hear about that has kind of spiderwebbed into all these different opportunities for both of us. So it was super cool to get to talk to him and learn, but expect to learn in today's episode about Shaun's journey from all the trauma that he went through as a kid and what that kind of evolved into for him as a young adult, and then now as a man and as a father. Learn how he balances being a father and running a wildly successful business, and then also learn about bodybuilding, what bodybuilding taught to him, and how he used bodybuilding, being a father, being a husband to cope with the hand that he's been dealt in life. So I'm very excited for you guys to hear this episode. If you do get something out of it, please share it with a friend. That's the only way the show is going to grow. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube if you're watching this, or if you're listening to this on an audio platform, make sure you follow the show and leave a review if you get something out of it. Without further ado, let's talk to Shaun. All right, Shaun. I am super, super excited for this one. You've been like the number one person that people have mentioned so far on the podcast. So
That's a
I'm
good thing.
super excited to actually get to talk to you and dive into why that is, why you've impacted so many people the way you've impacted them. So you doing all right today, man?
I am outside of a year stretch of not getting consistent sleep. I'm doing great.
Yeah, yeah. So you're brand new dad, or not brand new because you've got kinder, but brand new
Boy,
boy
dad.
dad,
Yeah,
and so you're going through the newborn stages again. How's little man shaping up?
dude, he's great. So he's with me. Both of them are with me 24/7 as I work out of the house, run the business, and it's a bit of a juggling act. But a lot of friends have asked, how we're doing, how's he doing? I'm like, we're getting kicked in the balls because he's not sleeping like
Yeah,
2 or 3 hours at a stint at night. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, what's wrong?" I'm like, "Nothing. He's healthy. He's happy. He's great. He just either wants to be held or he's hungry or whatever it is. He does sleep better for me. Mom,
yeah.
mom did mention that this morning, but a year of not sleeping, I think the brain shrinks a little bit. You kind of
Hmm.
feel a little loopy, but other than that, I couldn't be happier because he's vibrant, he's healthy, he's full of life, and it's just great to have him, man. It's been fun. It's just changing dynamic with the little boy. You can see it out of the gates. So it'll be fun as he gets to start talking and everything else.
That's so awesome, man. And he looks so much like Kinder did at that age too.
Yeah, we were comparing some pictures. Other than Kinder just having like dark hair and like the thick eyebrows, the just everything, even mannerisms and the way that they're playing. And now it's cool because she's home too now, and being that like she gets to be around him, like he just mimics her and follows her
Yeah.
everywhere, and she's just his little pal. So
You can tell
yeah,
from your pictures and videos the way that he looks at Kinder. He is just like completely enamored with everything
yeah,
that she's doing.
always studying her, always. Yeah,
That's
man.
so awesome.
It's fun, and they're a day apart. Well, a day and 5 years. So she's the first,
Yeah.
and he's the second.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
so cool.
yeah,
That's
man.
awesome. Well, I wanted to kind of hop in a little bit, and I've got a bunch of stuff on the dadpreneur front for later slated in the show, but I wanted to talk about first how we kind of met. And I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
this story,
I do.
um, but you and I met at the 2019
Was yeah,
Kuklo Classic, I believe.
yep.
I competed in it, had no business competing in it because I had completely crashed myself into no muscle mass. But I did a prep and I stepped on stage, which I was proud of being able to do. But I set up a booth for my clothing company at the time, and we were right next to this company that was brand new,
Yep.
and next to this huge dude who had his hat pulled all the way down and looked like he was super pissed off at the world.
At the
And
world.
yeah, and he seemed to be pretty cool whenever we'd actually talk to him, but he looked like he might kill us if we continued the conversation too far. So, do you remember
That
that
didn't
at all?
that didn't bother your dad. Your dad didn't like. He
No.
was just, "What's up, man?" And just talking. Honestly, I think Nothing probably would bother him because he was. You could tell he was so happy to be there supporting you.
Yeah.
Like he was just so he was happy, and it just came
Yeah.
off that way, right? He just exuded it. So both your parents, but I don't remember what the conversations specifically were. They might have been around competing, but I know I talked to him because he was the one man in the booth when you were on stage, right?
Yep, he was.
Yeah,
He was.
yeah,
So that's just my dad in a nutshell. He is just like the kindest, the best human being like ever. But he drove up there early with me to like set up the booth, and like he was there to support me while we were while during the show of strength, which is like the powerlifting show that they put on before we actually stepped on stage, and then yeah, he manned it while I had to go do all my stuff. So eat my meals or go drink more water or get more water or whatever, right? He's just down for whatever in order to support his kids and everyone around him, really. But he was extremely. That was like one of the first events that we did for that company, and he traveled to a few others with me as well. But he is just so happy to be in that scenario where he gets to like talk to more people.
yep.
And so
You
he
could
probably,
tell.
I'm sure he probably talked your ear off.
Oh, it was fine, man. I mean, he was busy talking to people as well, and I could
Yeah.
just, could hear him talking. And he had mentioned that, oh yeah, it's my son. He's competing, but he was just happy to talk to everybody. And here I am, hat down, just like mad at the world. What's this
Yep.
guy? Yeah, yeah. So it's a great example, right? You never know who's watching.
Exactly, for sure. And so I mean, there's been a lot of stuff that has kind of sprung off of that, literally that one weekend in my life, honestly. But what that was like the launch of Pride, right? Like that was like the first weekend or one of.
Let me think. Let me think. Steve's show is normally what, in May or April?
It was May of 2019.
Yeah. So we had just launched. I went to the Arnold at the end of March. We launched like the second week of April, so we might have been a month old, maybe.
Yeah.
And I drove down, and obviously we were living in Dallas and then moved here. So I drove down. Yeah, I drove down, and I think we all did actually. I think everybody was there. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I remember even Jess coming up and Kinder, and it was to me it was like it's one of those things where you kind of it didn't seem significant at the time, obviously, like being there and like competing and having the booth and everything, but so many things kind of like sprung off of that, and one of those was your show and everything, or not your show, your brand Pride Foods, right? But we both kind of made fun of your temperament at the time, and it's funny to me, it's crazy to me to be able to see like talking to you now, right? Like we got on this podcast and we were getting into deep topics and you're giving me advice and we're talking deep before we even like press record here. Like your entire demeanor I feel like has changed so much. Maybe that's just because I know you better now, or
No,
it has that been
no.
a result of some inner work.
Yeah, man. The inner work has been, that was 6 years ago, 5 years
Yep.
ago, going on 5 years ago. And it's been it has been the best 5 year stretch of me, for me, of me, by
Yeah.
me. Um, and it's because of a lot of work that I've done on myself, on my surroundings, my diet, which would include what I listen to, what I watch, right? What I put into my body, not just through consumption of food. Even myself, the thoughts for myself, the talk to myself, all these different things. And we can get into specifically or around about what I've done, but yeah. So like the brand with the progress of the brand has been great. The progress with the family has been phenomenal. The
Hmm.
progress with me is what's led it all.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't know any better. I didn't know kind of the patterns that I was in and doing and repeating myself. And I would still be able to make progress despite those negative patterns. And for whatever reason, people still supported me and wanted to be around me and all these good things. And I'm greatly appreciative of it. But it was only going to take me so far. And at some point, it was going to be it started to become a net negative, right? And it was just weighing
Yeah.
me down more than helping me, especially as I needed to make this progress. So, man, the progress that I made on a personal level has been, and every day is still working towards making more and more, right? But just in a bad place. But the awareness had to come first, and
Yeah.
that awareness came maybe around 2020. As odd as that year was, a lot of that awareness came around that time.
I was just having a conversation with somebody how it seems like the pandemic did like a lot of really good things for some people that took that time and like grew from it, right? Or embarked. Like the guy I was just talking to, he'll be probably the episode right before, right after you. He lost 300 pounds during the pandemic.
Holy.
Um, yeah, like nuts. But he used that time, right? Like he was working out at home every day. He didn't have all the distractions. He could control that he wasn't, out grabbing like the cokes and the chips and all that stuff all the time, just justifying it while he's at work. And so he kind of used that time to like really control, like what you're saying, his diet of what's around him, what's available to him, what he's got access to. But let's talk about like your past, right? Your story. I know you were in the military. I know tell me about childhood, Shaun.
Let me go there with it. Uh, yeah, a troubled background,
Okay.
not by choice, obviously.
Yep.
Um, um, where do I start? How early you want to go? I'm not having a difficult time talking about it because I have a difficult time talking about it. It's just where do you start with the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
My mom was murdered at 3. Me and my siblings were kind of in an environment where physical, emotional, sexual, verbal abuse was a constant on a daily basis. I had 2 stepmoms who are since then deceased from drug related or alcohol related and kind of stuff like that. Kind of grew up out of a trash bag for most of my life as far as like moving around.
Yep.
Outside of a pretty good amount of like negative and really bad memories, I don't have much positive ones. Maybe a handful, literally, maybe a handful, right? That maybe
Yep.
start after like I'm 10 years old. And then there's some people in high school that a basketball coach or a teacher here that had some positive influences that I was able to make some ground on. But for childhood Shaun, it was just about survival, and I didn't even know this at the time. I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal for people to grow up in an environment like I did, right? And so, yeah, and I'm 100% okay with getting into the weeds
Yeah.
and the details as far as like what went on and all these different things. They don't bother me. It's a lot of the work that I've been doing the past
Well, it's
almost
what
3 years.
makes you you too. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
part of you.
yeah, yeah. I will say this. There was an enormous amount of suffering for that child, which is me, at the time. Um, and I think it's one reason that I fit in like a Tetris or a puzzle piece into bodybuilding is there's a perceived amount of suffering, even though you're choosing to do it. But there's a perceived amount of like physical suffering from the diet and the cardio and all the extra stuff. And so from the limiting kind of lifestyle as well. And it kind of just fell into a groove there. And one reason I think I enjoyed it, in addition to the isolation and all these different things, right, working towards that goal. But yeah, man, that childhood, that's what it mainly was. Um, and I often didn't talk about it on other podcasts or interviews just because I don't want to. 2 reasons: I didn't want to people to look at me like I'm broken, and two,
Yep.
I don't want to cast a negative viewpoint on, say, let's say my father who is still alive. He doesn't get on social media. He'll never see any of the things. But
Yeah.
just as a father now, realizing that I'm going to make mistakes, I won't make the same mistakes that he did, but I'm going to make mistakes, and I don't want to be. I don't want to. What's the word or the phrase? I don't want those mistakes to be the things that like, oh, Shaun was this because of his mistakes, right? He was
Yeah.
this way. Like, we're human. You're gonna make some. You're gonna make some tomorrow, the next day, and so forth and so on. And
Absolutely.
so, however, I've come to the realization that talking about it, communicating on it, can certainly help people because I know there was times where people opened up about their past, which helped me to work on things and for myself. And the biggest thing is there were all the things that had transpired had taken me to a place of a young adult, and now I was this young man, but I was acting like a child,
Yep.
right? I had childlike tendencies, the way I communicated, the way I handled myself, carried myself, the way I reacted to things, a lot, and so it's been it's been rather gratifying to be able to remove myself from those negative patterns that were
For
just
sure.
given to me as a younger, but yeah, I mean, like I said, so we can get into the weeds a little bit more about that, but yeah, it was nothing extremely motivational or anything like that.
No, I think it's extremely profound just for people to be able to, and I didn't even know a lot of those things. I know that you had kind of like you've kind of hit on a few of them here and there in podcasts I've listened to you on, and different Instagram posts and a couple of our conversations. But I appreciate you sharing that because I
Yeah.
think it's extremely profound. I don't think anybody's going to look at you as broken, because I think that people a lot of people do go through things like that, and they maybe don't ever escape the previous version of you where you're talking about you were constantly that child, you were constantly that person that was in that fight or flight mode, you were constantly in that person that was trying to reject the fact that that ever even happened instead of like embracing it and moving through it, right, to get to that other end, to get to where you are now,
Yeah. Well
where
said.
you've
Yeah.
had multiple people on just a few episodes that I've even done, right, where they're talking about how they look up to you, how they're trying to be, the type of dad and entrepreneur that you are, how they're trying to get to the person that's looking introspectively like you are. And so I think it helps people. I had a very, comparatively to a lot of people, I had a very cushy, like, I was extremely blessed as a kid, right? But my dad, for example, who we've already talked about in this podcast, his mom passed away before he was at the age of 2. His dad was a professional wrestler and skipped out of town and had a bunch of stuff going on that was not super great, and that relationship's always been kind of rocky for him and for us. But he was raised by his grandfather, right? All that stuff happened to him at a very young age, and he had to cope with the fact that that wasn't something that he had, was like that picture perfect family. But we just talked about how amazing of a person he is, and like how he just approaches life with this joy, and he's like, you would never know, like as
Right.
his kid or as anyone around him, that any of that stuff ever happened to him, because he made a decision at a young age that what has happened to me in the past does not define me in the future. And
Right.
that doesn't mean that my kids have to deal with this. That doesn't mean that my wife has to deal with this. That doesn't mean that anybody around me is going to have to see the effects of what I went through personally, and I'm going to choose that. And so I've always really admired him about that, and it's taken till I've gotten older to be able to talk to him about that, or to be able to acknowledge that, because I think it's such a profound thing for life, of like, your circumstances don't make you.
Dude,
Like,
it's
you
so
can
like
choose. You have the power to choose.
coming from my background, my history, being able to relate to chaos, essentially, right?
Hmm.
I'm envious and hats off. Like, especially given the resources and the times when your dad decided to do that, they weren't around, right? Like he faced that darkness on his own,
Yep.
and I ignored it for so long, and I couldn't anymore. The internal chaos, the internal noise just got too much, and it started to consume me, and so man, I again hats off to your dad being able to do that, because and that gives me like, I'd love to get to the point to where, and I'm closer now than I was yesterday. I've, tremendously
Yeah.
better. Like you said, you didn't even know any, but you did know me from 5 years ago, and that wasn't the case. But
Yeah.
where, yeah, my dad, I want my daughter and my son to say, yeah, my dad was this, this, and this, and then when I get older, I'll talk to them about just life in general, right? But how it's not, because it's in the past, man. Like it's in the
Hmm.
past. They're gifts that I can take from them, right?
Yeah.
Like that's because life is a gift. Like you know what I mean? I'm living I love my family, where I am, all
Yeah.
these things in life. And it's not perfect and there's things I'm gonna mess up, but I'm just so fortunate now. To me, I see life as a gift. And so those things that happened back then, I can take little things from them where I can like help either myself, someone else, or my family right now. And so
Absolutely.
man, I just to hear your dad that from your dad, that's because I would have never in a million years have thought that off of our
I'm
interactions, right?
I'm telling you, man, it is wild. And my grandpa was a great guy, the guy that raised him and everything. But it's the stuff that he had to go through as a kid was vastly different than anything I ever had to experience. And I never even knew a lot of these things until I remember basically finding out as a teenager. Like, I always thought it was kind of weird growing up. You're like, well, why don't I have a grandma over here? You know,
Yeah.
what, you know? Um,
Intentionally.
and
They were different
yeah,
intentionally. Your father intentionally had them different. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so then, like, I found out probably as a teenager that all of this stuff had happened to him, and I'm like, wow, like this person that I've always just pictured as like life just seems to come so easy to him. He's so easygoing, he's so nice, he's so just inclusive of everybody around him. Like, this is the environment that he grew up. These are the circumstances, the hand
Choice.
that he was dealt. But I say all that because you talking about your struggle, you talking about how you tried to cope with it, the different ways that you tried to work with it that didn't possibly work, or didn't get you to where you are now. There might be people that listen to this that are in that scenario still, right? That are kidding themselves in terms of like, if I just, get a little bit stronger physically, I can deal with all this shit on the inside, right? Or people won't want to fuck with me, right? Or if I can, mask it through these being the party guy, right? Or being the successful entrepreneur, or any number of different scenarios. There's a lot of people dealing with their shit, just not in a super healthy, like head on type of way. So
Yep.
with you, do you think that heading into like going full on into bodybuilding, like we talked about before we kind of press record here, do you feel like you were trying to get as strong as you possibly could on the outside to deal with some of those things, or do you feel like that was just something that you use as an outlet?
It's a good question because I've often thought about it because I wanted to be bigger, and when I got bigger, it wasn't big enough.
Yeah,
I got pretty big, right? And I won a lot of titles, and I was very, very. I'm sitting here behind is all of the trophies, including the Nationals one.
yeah,
And my daughters painted them all because they don't like the memories and like what I've gotten inside means more to me than the trophies themselves, right?
for sure.
And so I honestly think that it was less about me wanting to be bigger or stronger. Like I'm sure there's some of that, right? Especially being violated and abused as a kid,
Yeah,
and not being able to do something about it, like not liking that, and this perceived idea that if I'm bigger and stronger, then either I can or people will not want to mess with me, right?
for
When in
sure.
reality, like that size doesn't equal any of that, right? You go to an
No, yeah,
MMA gym and you'll get tossed around, right?
yeah, yeah,
But I really do. I've been able to sit with it for a while to think about like, man, what was it about bodybuilding that just kind of sucked me in? The latter that didn't come first was um, that I did well out of the gates. My first show, I almost won the overall. I won the overall in novice, my class in the overall. But
yep,
had I beat the guy, I showed up in the morning just flat, came back and looked wild, Coke and fries and burgers and you name it, right? Had
yep,
I beat him, I would have. He won the overall. I would have won the overall. Um, and my first show, so like out of the gates, and looked like from a 1 to a 10, like night and day different on my first show. And
yeah,
then second show, and then third show, winning my class or winning the overall. And then my fourth show was USA's, and I got
hmm,
fourth. At a pro qualifier, my fourth show, I got fourth. And so I got bit by the bug of success. You put something in, your reward is progressive success, right?
yep,
That was what got me, like hooked me after. The first thing I think that I really do think that got me was just the fact that like it was another level of suffering that I was accustomed to, even from the point of not eating, because there were times growing up when just food wasn't available. And so you kind of just had to deal with that, the hunger pains and whatnot. And so I
yeah,
think there was a level of suffering that I didn't even know I was accustomed to, that bodybuilding kind of slipped into for me, or I slipped into bodybuilding and it did that. And I just, I distinctly remember a number of times, like talking to, Jess, who was my girlfriend at the time, or somebody else, and I'd look at people's photos or whatever. I'm like, yeah, they're better bodybuilder than me, but I will suffer. I literally would say I will suffer more than them to get leaner, right? To get leaner,
yeah,
I will outsuffer them. I will outsuffer them. Like that's a, like now we realize like bodybuilding, that's stupid. You don't need to do that, right?
yeah, yep.
We're smarter now, but at the time I was doing it, that's what kind of grabbed the hold of me.
Yeah, and there's I've got several things that I want to even go into off of what you just said, but there's a quote from. Have you ever seen that clip with Will Smith where he talks about like the difference between me and most people is I'm willing to die on a treadmill.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's one of my favorite videos ever to get like if I need to get like hype for something like that's kind of what I'll pull up because it's it's exactly what you're talking about, right? Like you can look at these people and be like, they might be more successful for me now. Like it might be smarter than me now. They might be, stronger, bigger, faster, look better, whatever now. But like, I'm willing to die on that treadmill. Like unless they're like the two options are, they fall off or I die. Like those are the two things that could possibly happen. So it made me think of that quote, but I also liked how you said at the beginning with the trophies, like how your kids have painted them now. I specifically pulled a quote from early on in your Instagram. Yep, I love it. I love it. I specifically pulled a quote from early on in your Instagram where you said, in a caption, you said, the trophy will sit on the mantle and likely be discarded at some point. Win, lose, or draw, make sure to enjoy the time with the people who are there for you through it all.
Yeah, yeah. I remember early on in my career. I say career. That's so stupid. Early on when I was competing,
I would say it was a career, but I would definitely say it was a bodybuilding career.
early on, it's just I got so engulfed in immersed in like the competing. I remember. Oh yeah. Okay. So Red River, no Grand Prix. I won the Grand Prix. I won light heavyweight or heavy. I won my class. Won the overall most muscular. Right. And arguably the best that I made ground. Like here was then this show and this show. I was like, holy, like crap! I made so much progress, and I peaked well for the show. It was a very, very, very difficult prep. Probably one of the most difficult. After that, I said, I'm done bodybuilding. It was so hard. I was just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
And we were going to get something to eat, and we were trying to figure out what restaurant to go. And I kind of like flipped. I was frustrated and this, and I wanted that. I had expectation of this, and I remember like just being like so mad, and I got all this like pent up, and we had a little words back and forth, me and Jess, or and then I was like I just had this realization, like it doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm with them. I just starved for 18 weeks or however long it was, right? Like not legitimately, but like I just put
Yeah, yeah,
myself
yeah.
in a grinder. And like I'm worried about where I'm gonna get some burgers and fries or whatever the hell I'm gonna get. And I caught myself and I said it out loud. I'm like, you know what? I was like, where do you want to go? She's like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you just. I said, yeah, I don't care. You just like were there with me through it all. Like where does every, and I was like, I asked everybody, where do you want to go? We had a phone call. We got into like this little argument. She was talking to her, I think her parents, and if I remember this correctly, she might be able to correct me. Hung up. We had this talk, and then she called him back and was like, "Hey, where does everybody want to go?" Because I was like, "I don't care. Where do you want to go?" Like I had this realization that it was like one of the first times that I was like, I had the opportunity to like rewire this
Yeah.
path, and so and then I had that thought like I need to enjoy the time with these people that have supported. They come to the show, they buy the tickets, I mean, dude, every holiday, right? What gym is open?
Yep.
What can Shaun eat? What can't he eat? And keep in mind, my family dynamic growing up, even my cousins, aunts, uncles, tias, tios, whatever you want to call them, like it was chaos, right? It was chaos, and so
Yep.
I'm now injected into her family dynamic and friends and whatnot, and they're supportive. What does Shaun need? This, that, and the other. And so I had this come to Jesus. Like you need to enjoy the time with them because they're there through it all. And every prep, Jess was there every prep. And so just to me, I had this realization that man, that's what makes it sweet because these things right here, I mean, everything's going to be gone in 100 years, but these things don't mean anything, right? It's the
Yeah.
people. It's the people, man. It's the memories with them. So, yeah,
Absolutely. I and bodybuilding at its core is a very selfish sport. Like
yeah.
even I even noticed that in my I did one prep. How many shows did you do?
Not many, man. 7, 8.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
did one, right, and I got a little third place trophy. Which again, it's cool to have stuff, but it doesn't really mean anything. Like it's not gonna serve me at all the rest of my life. But the experience will, and I'm sure as we've talked about, like obviously that experience has served you well.
Sure.
But I even noticed with my one show that my mom specific, like a few weeks out from my show, my mom kind of like talked to me and she was like, when is this over? And I'm like, well, mom, I've been don't diminish it to just when is this over. Like I wish it was over too. This is not super fun for me. I'm putting myself through hell here. And she's like, well, I want my son back.
Yeah.
And like, you haven't been my son. And that kind of hit me as far as putting it in perspective for me of after my show, and just really making sure that I can show up for everybody around me, because I didn't realize either how selfish I had been that entire time. And it's, if you're gonna come home for the weekend from college, like I'm having to text everybody ahead. Can you have 3 pounds of chicken sitting out and de-thawing so I can cook it when I get there? I gotta have like X amount of oats. I gotta have X amount of eggs. Like, can you guys make sure that that's, and it is a very, very selfish process. And once you realize that, you can't really unrealize it.
So, and I'm going to go off on a quick little tangent. So I just recently did a 5 day fast,
Okay.
and one of the things that I learned about the fast that I like it for a few reasons, and we can get into that later. But
Yeah.
when I was dieting, I'd easily become a dickhead, right? Like I was one of those guys that people talk about that. Why is he being a dick? This, that, and the other. Not always, but there are oftentimes. Especially it
Yeah.
was exacerbated if I was training. I wasn't working out. I wasn't exercise. I was training. I took it
Yep.
extremely serious, and I wasn't there to talk. And so a lot of times I'd come off a certain way, and I own that, right? That was me. That wasn't anybody else making that choice. That was me.
For sure.
Um, and specifically when I was eating little amounts of food, 1,000 calories, 1,200 calories, whatever it was rather difficult, and I was edgy and on edge and whatnot. And so I did this 5 day water fast, and um, now the wiser me, it allowed me to. I've started to beat myself up on the way that I treated myself and more importantly other people while I was dieting, and that I can't go back and change any of that. But this 5 day fast, I think actually is easier than dieting for a show because there's not stimulants, there's not drugs, there's not fat burners, there's not the fluctuation of blood sugar, you name it, right? Extremely
Yeah.
low um, body fat percentages, etc. But nonetheless, it put me in a very similar position in regards to the hunger and being a little agitated, if that's the case. And I was able to slow down, and I talked really slow. I was very positive, even though I was a little drained on energy. I was doing
Yeah.
75 hard as well, so I was still, output was still up, still having things to do. And even my wife said it. She's like, it's so. She was like, I was worried that you were going to be that Sean again, right?
Yeah.
And it gave me an opportunity to right that wrong, if you will, at least for myself, giving me the power, saying, "Oh, that's a choice." I was making that, I'm now conscious. I didn't make the choice then. It was just programming taking over, but I'm making a conscious choice to be a certain way right now. And I wasn't perfect. There was like one time where I got a little frustrated, but I had the opportunity that 5 day fast to really kind of, exercise or grab that tool and say, I can handle this. I can treat people
Yeah.
with respect and communicate and all that stuff. So it was fun. And that I've done a number of fasts. That was the longest one this year.
I know you. Yeah, you've talked to me about fasting before, and Gary Brecka is actually making that pretty mainstream right now. Like, I think right now they're in the middle of a. He has a huge challenge, which, me being an entrepreneur and me looking at it, and I'm like, I don't know really what the legalities of doing a 72-hour fasting challenge are going to be with I'm sure some of the stuff that people are going to do to themselves during that time. But he has a massive, like, nation, probably even worldwide, fasting challenge. I think it was December, or, today's the 21st, but the 19th through like the 22nd. And it's, hundreds of thousands of people signed up for it to do
Wow.
this 3 day fast. But what do you do the fast for? Like, just in short terms, like what are you trying to get out of a fast that it's that long, that extensive?
Sure. So I started the year off with a 3 day fast, 72 hour. I'm a part of
Okay.
this Apathy Dads program. And so I started with a 3 day fast. And then I'm like, I just like the way that I feel for a number of reasons I'll get into. And then so the year took on me doing 124 a week, 248, or 148 a week, 124 a week, a 48 a month, and a 72 a quarter. And so
Yep.
I ended up doing like 472. And then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do a 5 day. And I would have taken it to a 7 day, But I had a trip coming up to Austin,
Hmm.
and I was moving so slow. I was like, all right, we got to call this one, especially when you come out of a fast that long. The digestion still, it's just going to be touch and go, and I don't want to
Yeah,
be
and
having
I'm sure
crash.
your leptin and ghrelin are all over the place, kind of like coming off a show.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so even the day after, I forgot whenever I'm that specifically that depleted, I get this burst of energy, and I eat some food, and then I get tanked. And that I don't know if that's blood sugar or any other hormones or whatever. But
Yeah.
sure enough, that next day after I broke the fast, I was hurting. But for me, um, all the above on the health reasons as far as like blood sugar, autophagy, cellular regeneration, um, a fast that long, stem cell production, growth hormone, and the statistics on anti-cancer. Sure,
Yep.
I'm down for that, right?
Yep.
All the implications from negative blood sugar, so writing any of that, and I'm pretty good bill of health outside of that, right? So I'm not doing it because of, I'm doing it as a
For
preventative,
sure.
but more for me, what I'm doing it for, I eat pretty clean. I have a certain amount of foods I eat, chicken and ground beef and eggs that we get from our chickens that are right there. My wife makes sourdough bread now, like, so we're pretty clean. I love dried mango and dried pineapple are my vices. So
Yep.
I
You
don't eat like,
introduced me to that.
dude, it's so good, it's so good. And
It is. It's like
Now
candy.
Kinder's eating them. So like, yeah, a house and home.
Yep.
Um, but being an entrepreneur, you understand this. You go through times of emotional roller coasters, man. And in these emotional roller coasters, what I've started to realize is that all the other coping mechanisms I've done fairly well at getting rid of, right? Done very, very good in handling these things. And what I realize is that what I do though is I emotionally eat. So I eat a
Yep.
giant bag of mangoes just because I'm not hungry. I just, there's emotion, right? And so what I feel like, and this is just my, there's no science behind this, but if
Yeah.
I'm having this emotion, I'm stressed out with this or finances or I got to do this, got to do that, the emotions inside of me, I eat food to deal with that emotion, whether it's dopamine or whatever it is, and then that emotion sits and it stays on me,
Yep.
and I don't work through it, I don't work past it, I don't understand, whatever. When I fast, it offers me the ability to exercise not just compounding that emotion with food, dopamine or whatever it is. The extended fast or that plus this little story that I've told myself, right? We all have two wolves, right? You've heard the story, and everybody's like,
Yep.
"Well, which?"
Yeah. I've seen you post about it. You've told me. Yeah. Tell it.
So they say which one wins, and it's like, well, the one you feed, right?
Hmm.
For me, growing up, I was in an environment I didn't have a choice to feed this positive wolf of light. The other one fed off of me, the dark one. I got accustomed
Yep.
to it. I was in, the Batman movie. I think it's Batman Begins or Returns when Bane is like, "Oh,
Bane.
you think darkness is?" I love it.
Yeah.
It's my
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I hear it and I just get goosebumps, right?
Same.
Um,
No, I think it's a cold quote, man.
Dude, it's so good, and it I didn't even know it was the actor Tom
I
Hardy.
forget his name too. Yeah, Tom Hardy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Whenever I realized it was him, I liked it even more. I was
Yep.
like, okay, yeah, yeah, and so I got accustomed to that. And but for most of my young childhood and adult life up until a few years ago, that dark wolf was in control, whether I knew it or not, whatever I wanted to admit it or not, right? With issues of that and vices that all men deal with, right? From lust to food to addictions, you name it.
Yep.
And so now that wolf is no longer in charge. However, I've gotten accustomed to kind of liking some of that, at least the
Yeah.
darkness, or at least they being able to exercise that ability. And so, what I conceptualize to myself is that by starving myself, I can feed that wolf because
Hmm.
that wolf kind of like feeds on that starving, right? On that suffering a little bit, if you will. However, I'm in control. So he's that wolf is eating, but it's because I'm giving him the opportunity to. And then I get the opportunity to be in a situation where emotions might be high, I might be frustrated, and I'm at the point where all my nerves are exposed because I'm super hungry. I'm right now. I'm not getting any sleep. I was doing 75 hard, and my wife comes to me or my daughter comes to me, and I talk very eloquently. I talk slow. I'm polite, right? I
Yep.
communicate and I lead my family, but by starving myself, if you will, for a short amount of time, limiting myself from this food, I then feed that wolf, but I'm the one in control. And so that's the way I conceptualize this. That's one of the reasons that I have rather enjoyed doing the fast
Got it.
this year.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I've heard the autophagy stuff and all of the kind of health stuff, but I think that the fact that you're doing it for both inner and outer work is really really cool, and it brings me to another quote that I've got here. Really, I've got two that could apply to this, but I'll save one for later. One of the quotes, this isn't from you, but this was just one that I kind of brought in. When it comes to emotions, you need to name it to tame it. So like your story with the wolves makes me think about that because you're almost like giving those emotions or those pieces of you a name, and it even kind of just works because it's name it to tame it. Like it's a wolf, like obviously that'd be something
Yeah,
you'd want to tame.
yeah, yeah. With Kinder, um, kids, you'll realize this in years to come. They're a roller coaster of emotions, and you do your best to let them let them go, let them experience them all. But we are very very keen on naming them. Hey, well, she's frustrated. What are you feeling right now? Right, frustrated. What do you? And the one that she doesn't like to say out loud or name is like when she's hurting, when she falls
Yep.
down, and I'm like, that's pain. It's okay. It's good that you feel pain, right? That's a gift. We're alive. And so we name those emotions, but also on the other side of the spectrum, whenever she's just so happy that like the other night she had tears in her eyes. She was just, I'm like, what are you feeling? And she's just like emotions. And so like she's just so happy with whatever we were doing, and she's just a bundle of happiness. But
Yeah.
we definitely try to name it. And I didn't hear that. It's a dope quote. I've never heard that. I know that I had issues with it, obviously growing up, and as an adult, I still do, I'm sure. And so I want to program her in the opposite direction to understand all these wide variety of emotions that she's experiencing.
So one more kind of I guess question in the bodybuilding realm. I did a ton of research going through all of your Instagram. I even saw that this was like a newer Instagram because one of them got shut down. It looked like, or
Yeah,
hacked or
doing the
something.
research. Yeah,
But I saw videos and stuff of you training with Mike O'Hearn, Guy Cisternino, Dexter Jackson, John Met, like all sorts of crazy people, and so I had a, because I'm so interested in quotes and just like what can I pick out of your brain, out of everyone that I've had on so far, and people far that I can't even access, right? um I'm curious, with all the people that you have gotten to meet and train with, what are some of the lessons that I guess that you would maybe attribute to one of those guys, or to somebody else that you think is the most powerful one you've kind of taken and ran with?
quote lessons if you're asking, right?
Yeah, quote, or it could be just a lesson if you don't remember a specific quote.
Man, it's got to be Meadows.
Really?
Yeah, it's got to be. He just so some of the listeners may not know, some of them may know. He essentially made cream of rice popular in the industry, right? It
Yep.
was the concoction bowl that he had, and I worked with him with 2000 for 2014 USA's, where he introduced me to cream of rice, and then so what would that be? I can't even do math. 5 years, 16, yeah, 4 years. I don't even know. No, that was 14. Yeah, yeah, okay. So essentially, 6 to 8 years later, I've got this product that I'm coming out with,
Yep.
and he's in a position. He is already an entrepreneur at that point. He was even in Forbes magazine for being the self-made like millionaire, but not from bodybuilding. Like he worked for Chase, J.P. Morgan forever,
Wow.
and we had become a little bit more than acquaintances. I wouldn't say we were friends, but he would text me on my birthday and happy birthday this, and we would talk and we meet at events, and we would work out and stuff like that. And so we would become somewhat close. And just it wasn't anything he said specifically. It was the way that he carried himself always.
Yeah.
And he could have, I was in a position where he could have taken advantage of me or taken advantage of the situation, not even me, but like, hey, Sean, I'll do this business with you. And of course, he would have been able to sell it like that.
Hmm.
And he, out of the gate, he goes, Sean, I don't want anything for this. I don't like, this is your business. I just want to see good people do great things. I want to see good people
Wow.
succeed. Literally said that. I probably still have it. No, he called me on that one. He called me because I mailed it to him, and he called me and he goes, Sean, what the hell? I just had this. He's like, what can I do to help? Don't answer it right now. Think about it, whatever I can do. And so my first event was a seminar that he put on with Dr. Serrano and another gentleman. I can't remember his name right now. In the hotel before the Arnold, and he was always just so willing to help. He was the biggest thing about him though was family. Before he passed, our last interaction, we were at an event in Virginia, and him and I went downstairs to the hotel to have breakfast, and we just talked about family, man. Like nothing bodybuilding, little business, and we just talked about. He talked about his sons. I was a new father at the time, obviously, and we talked about Kinder. And I don't remember like specifics of the ins and outs, but he was just nothing but giving me advice on like make sure like family first. It's all that matters. It's all that matters, right?
Yeah.
Not that like friends and other people don't matter, but like in regards to like materialistic items and this, that, and the other. And so it was more so I'm sure he said things that were witty or that were one liners, but it was more so the way that he carried himself. Um, yeah, yeah,
I love that. I honestly I think that one liner of I want to see good people do great things. I'm definitely going to add that to my arsenal because that's I think that's generally like if you achieve and I'm not saying myself, but if you achieve any level of success, I feel like a general feeling that you have if you're a decent human being is that you want to see, you know, how hard it was for you to get to this
you want
spot.
others to do the
No,
same.
you want others to do the same, and if you can help somebody get there faster or better or surpass you, generally you want that to happen, right? And so I think that goes along with that.
Yeah, especially in a position where, again, he had a vantage point.
Yeah, he could have easily said like, "Hey, I can blow this up from day one. I want 50% of the company or 80% of the company," and like you probably would have said yes, you know.
Yeah, I
But
was in an environment where I'd have been like, sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that's insane. So let's talk about the rise of Pride Foods then. Obviously, John played a huge role in it, but you're working on yourself. You're towards the end of kind of like your time as a bodybuilder, and 2019 Kuklo Classic comes around, and you're setting up your booth a few weeks after launch. What did the early stages of that that endeavor look like?
hustle, man. So we're warehousing out of the warehouse, out of our garage. When we just moved to
Yep.
more, luckily it was a 3 car
Mhm.
garage, and I could fit 15 pallets if I broke them down, which is pretty good for a garage.
Very good.
And you know, the office and the dynamic of the shipping center in the house morphed a few times, but um, I was still employed by Nutrex at the time, knowing that my time would come to an end there. My
Yep.
wife had just taken a position in Oklahoma, which honestly, given everything, it was the best thing for us. Um, so the moving company would not move the product for liability reasons. They didn't want to be liable for it. So I had to get a U-Haul. It got delivered there, right? Like 5 pallets. I had to take those pallets off, put them on boxes on a U-Haul, drive that up, unload the boxes in. Like I had just moving boxes before I even sold anything.
Yep.
We're in a house full of unpacked boxes, just madness, chaos. With a one in, I think she was 1 in 3 or 4 months, and I told Jess I want to go live like the day that we get there, and she's like, absolutely not. I'm like, I want to go live. I had already went to the Arnold and come back. People were wanting the product, right? And
Yeah.
she's like, no. And so I didn't tell her. She knows now, but I didn't tell her, and I went live the next day. And I'm like, hey, we've got like 75 orders in queue. Like, we got, I got to start packing. She's like
Yeah.
rolling her eyes at me. And so we just hustled out of the house for over a year, I believe. Yeah, or maybe yeah. And it, I still do. I still do. But we out of the gates. based off of my relationships from competing, from working as a sales rep for Nutrex, from when I was with Gasp, uh, Gaspari, all the relationships that I had made traveling all over. We got a tremendous amount of support from my peers then and now in the fitness industry, which it was extremely helpful to get us out because Instagram had just started to like work in the favor of like a business, like to have
Yep.
people monetize and stuff like that, especially for small businesses. And so we organically just hit the ground running. And we've had issues with never issues with sales, issues with inventory, kind of ever since.
Which is a we talked a little bit about that on Alfonso's episode of you pretty much so you brought him on, right, and you were employee, he was employee number one essentially, and you get to this new warehouse and you guys are doing some fulfillment for, I think it was HG Muscle maybe at the
Yep.
time.
Yep.
And essentially like he gets there, he's working, and then all of a sudden the warehouse is empty. And that was kind of the start of the supply chain issues. Walk through what that went, because I know from his perspective he talked about like, I took this risk and I'm over here. Like, do I have a job next month if we don't get anything, or next week? And like, what
Yep.
is this? So what, from the owner's perspective, what was your thought process there?
Yeah. So, I remember distinctly telling him like, "Hey, man, like, I'm pretty conservative. So regardless if we get products, you're getting paid. I
Hmm.
don't care if you have to sweep the warehouse 20 times, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
good. You're good." Um, And for me, it was just like, batten down the hatches and let's, I didn't know the extent of the issues that we were going to be facing. One, I'm an extremely new entrepreneur. We're the first to do a product like this in the world.
Yep.
And I don't know anything about manufacturing at the time. And so, like,
And it
Ed,
has absurd demand too. Like, people don't think about that being an issue.
we had a
They think
huge
about like
backing
that
with,
being the dream scenario, but that can literally kill a business, having too much demand.
and we did and we did. The only reason that I think we were able to survive it is I started pulling off of certain channels. I didn't sell to I didn't list on Amazon. I didn't sell to certain retailers. Essentially, what I said is like we're gonna bleed out slowly. Once I realized that this delay in our inventory, our products, going to take over long, a year. So essentially, before Alfonso had gotten there, we had a little bit of a delay from like 12 to 14 week lead time. We were looking at 22 to 30 weeks. And I'm like, okay, they're
Okay.
telling us this is normal. I'm like, it kind of sucks, but okay. And then the next one hit us, and that one was like 4 months longer than it should have been. And that's the one that Alfonso walked into. And we were at maybe like 20 boxes. There's a picture I took like this from the racks of the warehouse,
Yeah.
and you can see all that we have on the one, two, three, on the fourth row. Everything we can hold 160 pallets, and we've got like 20 boxes sitting like way off in the back, right? Strawberry and unflavored,
Wow.
and yeah, man. And so that was the first one. We got it back in stock. I had orders. I placed them correctly, and then everything happened. And long or the short, it took us 16 and 18 months respectively to get two orders that I had placed. And when they showed up some at the same time, both runs, which is a big no-no, right?
Yep.
We're front loaded with all this product, 2 year shelf life, but nonetheless. And then one, it started to show up October and then didn't finish until April of the next year. So like we had international distribution that they were ready to go, well, a year beforehand, but they were ready to go in October. Well, they had to wait until April. We couldn't because I mean, it was the end of their run, right? And their
Yep.
products are flip flop. The products that aren't popular here are popular there, and so they're pushed to the back of our production. However, they needed it anyways. So yeah, man, it was stressful. I was given the opportunity to really see myself in the mirror, like how I'm going to handle these stressors.
Yeah.
Um, and what I've realized and I've come to know, and it's very very frustrating. I source my bags. I source the rice still, and we can get into the quality of rice, and I'd love to, but I source the rice. That's other than that, it's organic cane sugar, monk fruit, natural flavoring, and sea salt.
Yeah.
That's it. And so I kept I was told and told it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID, it's COVID. And when in reality, my rice went from what it is now, 2 week lead time. They made to order, 2 week lead time. They're the largest organic long grain white rice grower in the U.S. They're a big deal.
Yep.
It went from 2 weeks lead time to the longest, I think, like 8 weeks is like the longest. And so we're talking 56 weeks, 60 weeks it took to get my product. And I was told over and over again, oh, it's allocated. Oh, it's this. Oh, it's that. Just completely lied to, right? Now
Yep.
that I know manufacturing, I know I was getting lied to. I was getting
Yep.
jerked around, right? Um, but yeah, it's frustrating. And I know from Alfonso's standpoint, like it was frustrating. It was worrisome. It was concerning. Like I get it, right?
For sure.
But the crazy thing is let's say that vacuum gets filled by us, and I get so busy just selling and growing pride that I don't get the opportunity to work on myself.
Yep.
And so I hate that it happened. I'm very frustrated that it happened. But in that that time span is when I really got the opportunity to see my patterns and see the things that I didn't like. Right? It gave me a vantage point, and since then I've been able to really focus on getting better as a human, as a father, as a husband, as a leader, and hopefully an entrepreneur and business owner as well. So it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah, as it should be, right? Like, and I know, like you kind of hit on it, but this was all happening during the pandemic too, right? When nobody knew what was happening in the world, and there was so much uncertainty, um, and so the fact that you did, most people I don't think would have the foresight to be like, okay, I've got this lull in business. This business is here. It's handicapped at the moment. You know, there's this huge bottleneck. There's a worldwide pandemic happening where the world's just like shut down right now. We're waiting on product for half a year to a year and a half, which is nuts to even think about, right? And I'm gonna work on myself. Like that takes a ton, instead of just sitting in your stress and your worries and like your anxiety of like what's next, what's gonna happen, if when we get back in stock, am I gonna be able to still sell this thing? Is this a flash in the pan? Like what who who's gonna be buying still? Are people waiting on me? Or are they just filling it with something that they're gonna be buying now moving forward? Like that has to be so tough to just be like, you know what, we're gonna be okay, and I'm gonna work on myself so that I'm better on the other side of this.
You know what I realized is so it was chaos, right? But I grew up in chaos, and then when I joined the army, it's a bit of chaos. Early in my
Yep.
marriage, it was chaos, and so that now the levels of chaos have varied, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
it's chaos. And so what I realized is that here I am in chaos again. Well, life is always going to offer you chaos. It's how are you inside? And so that's when I had this realization of like, well, none of it's going to get better unless I get better because it's how
Yep.
I perceive it, like your father, like your dad, and how he chooses to take on those challenges. And so it was just the really big thing is becoming a father at the same time. And
Yeah.
as they get older, they start to hit year and a half, 2 years, and they're little mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, it's very easy for programming to take over at those points whenever you're in a frustrated situation, and it was a magnifying glass for the things that I needed to work on,
Yeah.
um, and it offered a deep perspective, and it was all right time. That's when I made the decision, like, okay, I gotta get some serious help, and fortunately, I was around the right people that I was able to do so.
That's interesting that you say that, but becoming a father like forced you to. So many people think that they got to get all their shit together before they become a parent, right? They got to get all of the like so many things in line before they become one. I was listening to a podcast actually yesterday with Whitney Cummings on Chris Williamson's podcast, and she's a comedian, right? And she's famous for being super like brash in a lot of things that she says and kind of vulgar and like just kind of how she approaches things and Their podcast together was actually super introspective, and she's super pregnant right now. I think she's like 3 weeks out from popping, right? Like she's very very close to becoming a mother.
Don't
But
ever
she
tell a
talked
woman.
about
Don't ever tell a woman they're super pregnant. Just side note.
yeah. Well, she said it on the podcast.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
okay. Oh, well, she would.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she would.
Yeah, but she's so close to just like she's so close to becoming like taking that next step in her life, and she talked about like she just jokingly said, if you need like some real in-depth therapy, just get pregnant. And she was like, this has been the best thing that's ever happened to me because now all of the stupid shit that I was giving so much attention to, all the people that I cared about if they didn't like me, all the people pleasing I used to do. Um, just the innate need in me for all the stuff that my parents put me through to be, this specific person and constantly crave just like attention and like me and love me and like all this stuff. She was like, I don't care about any of it anymore. Like there's a human being inside of me that needs me to be good to be able to live.
Yep.
And all I really care about now, like if something pops up that I would have used to like freak out about and be in a terrible situation or a terrible mindset and just crash and burn my entire world, now I'm just like, okay, cool. And I just move on and I only care about what is this going to do? What kind of an environment am I providing for my baby, right? And she said it's been the most therapeutic thing ever was even just she said I've been working on my inner child, but I think it's because I have an inner child. Like that's how she
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah, that's actually
So
that's
that's
pretty
crazy.
pretty interesting to look at it that way, but for sure, especially having that awareness, and they're not even well, it's from a woman, and a woman obviously like that baby's there
Yeah,
already. For a father, it
for
takes
sure.
some time. It takes some time, especially
For sure.
once they look like you and they start acting like you. But no, I've never thought about that, especially since the baby's already to them. The baby's already that connection, the bond is there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. One last thing about kind of like the rise of pride, and obviously, I mean, you guys are huge right now. We got the opportunity to work with you guys on some marketing stuff, and it is insanity to think about us meeting on that random weekend in May of 2019, and then seeing what you've done with the brand since then, and several years later. But so, just want to give you flowers on that because it's truly inspiring. And I mean, look at behind you. We were just talking about. I didn't even know you had this gym set up at your house, but I knew you had some warehouse equipment in the old Pride HQ, and like, dude, the life that you've been able to create for yourself and for your family and your kids and all of that, like it is. You and Jess like are super super inspiring. But you have this concept of FitFo, which I heard you talk about in another podcast. Maybe you can talk about the FitFo mindset.
yeah, figure it the fuck out. And I
Yeah.
used just I said that because to Kinder, I say it quite a bit because I don't want to be just cussing at her all the time. Although sometimes I have loose lips, um, but I was in a Goldilocks era, is what I kind of feel like it is because
Yeah.
I grew up without technology, and then I get the opportunity to live in technology. So I grew up, and we barely even started getting TomTom. You don't even know what that is,
Yep.
probably. uh, Flip
Nope.
phones. I had a flip phone. It was my sister's flip phone that she left when she went to the army. T9, like a T9, probably can still T9 like it's nobody business, right?
Hmm.
Um, but I was 18. No, I was 19 years old, and I got in a fight with my dad, an argument over stealing gas, and I was wrong. I stole the gas from a motorcycle, and we got into a physical altercation, and he didn't kick me out, but he kicked me out. I kicked myself out. I loaded my truck up. I had I had no registration. I had no insurance. It was out of inspection. The truck was. I had a license at least, and I loaded my motorcycle on the back of it, and I drove from Texas to Washington State. Didn't have. Uh, there was no phone charger. There's no GPS on phones. I had a map, and just figure it out. And so
Yeah.
I'm in this interesting time where growing up, like if you didn't have all the resources that you have now, right? That are just, and those resources are phenomenal. I'm grateful for all of them, but they do enable a lot of people,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And it's not, it's like if they enable my daughter, it's not necessarily her fault. She doesn't, I have to teach her to fitfo. I have to teach her to figure these things out, right?
Yeah.
Even myself, sometimes like for example, if you're an expert in something, and you quite are, you quite frankly are in everything you guys are doing. I may come to you and I could figure it out through Google or just messing around, but I actually value learning from an individual and I value the conversation. So I may ask you. It's not asking you because I'm not resourceful. I'm asking because I value those two things before mentioned, right? But a lot of
Absolutely.
times we get to this point where we'll just ask, well, what is this or what is that? Whenever we have a plethora of resources at our fingertips, you can talk to Siri and she'll answer everything for you, right? And with the business, I've gotten into a plethora of conversations with logistics, with sourcing, procurement, you name it. And I'll tell the vendors or I'll tell who I'm talking. I'm like, hey, I don't know Jack. Talk to me like I'm, don't be disrespectful, but talk to me like I'm a fifth grader.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm trying to figure this out. Assume I know nothing about it because I don't. And so, and it served me well because I ask all ad nauseum, I ask 100 questions because I want to know what if this and that happens, all the different scenarios. And so that's just the thing. Yeah, figure it the fuck out. Like, because if I'm not going to do it, right? If I would have just sat on my butt and continued the patterns and been the jackass that I was and all these things, like nobody was going to come and give me anything. And I don't even mean the material things that you may see. I'm talking about the characteristic traits, right? The way that I'm nobody was going to come and say, hey, this is how you treat your wife, this is how you treat
yeah.
yourself, your family. And I had to figure those things out on my own. Now I got help. The help people have helped me attain that, but I had to figure out how to get to that starting line myself.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned the asking questions thing because well, I talked about it. I think it was on Alfonso's episode actually, where we talked about approaching mentors basically, and you and I even just recently talked about the reaching out to people, and if they're more successful or they've reached some level of success, usually they want to kind of pay it forward. There's a big difference in asking questions like, if somebody were to come to me and ask, how can I create a this is an example. I'm not great at it, but an example of like how can I create how do I position my personal brand on social media because I feel like I'm good at these things, but I'm not sure if this is landing right. Like how can I kind of switch this up? I'm very inclined to like answer that question and help out however I can there with my own kind of experiences and what I've seen in all the people that we've helped with personal branding. But if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, how do I post on YouTube?" I'm gonna probably either be a little bit of a dick to that guy, or I'm gonna be like send him a Google search and be like, or search it yourself, or ignore that person because it's like those are two very different questions. Like one of them, you're trying really hard, you have a higher level question that you feel like is stumping you, that you just need somebody to help navigate that's maybe been there before or experienced it before. The other one's like you didn't even try at this. You're looking for just a handout of something that you don't need a handout on this, right? Like
Or
talk to me a few more levels down the road.
they like the idea of doing it. They don't
Exactly.
necessarily want
Exactly.
to. They don't even they may not have the desire to even do that just yet. Maybe they want some dopamine, or they probably don't even know that. But
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, no, yeah, that's just perfect analogy.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so we've talked about Jessica so many times already. So let's talk about you guys and your relationship. First off, how did you land a gymnast from the University of Oklahoma?
Manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. A lot of jokes, being witty, um, and quite honestly, somehow for maybe 6 months, not showing her the real me at the time,
Yeah.
right? Through the manipulation, um, she was, in my eyes at the time, like A+, and she still is. But what I mean by that is, I'm not saying that she isn't still, but my perception of myself. So she was here, and I was here, and so I was like, I gotta, right? I gotta be on my best behavior,
Yeah. Yeah. You
and
got to put forth that best version of you.
yeah, and then like all relationships, once you get comfortable, you make mistakes, and
Yep.
I started to make a lot of mistakes. But initially, I showed her a potential side of me that I think she just fell head over heels for. and she was stubborn enough to hang on while I unpacked my bags over the years, and now my focus is making sure that that's worth it for her. Obviously, having the family and
Yeah.
doing all that stuff. But yeah, man, she's been I like to say my lighthouse.
Yeah. She is an absolute killer, and I know she's extremely successful in her own right. And you were even telling me before we hopped on here that, in the early years of you guys' relationship, you're working multiple jobs. She's working as a gymnastics coach, and you guys are taping two nickels together to kind of get by. And like now, look at where both of you have gotten to, and there's been no shortage of you stepping up, right? Like you are now with taking care of the kids and being home like doing all the stuff that you're doing now, but also at the beginning of you guys' relationship, her also standing in to be able to help you to where you can work on you and taking maybe some extra responsibilities off of the table so that you've got less you're having to deal with, and even helping you with the rise of Pride Foods and all that she did with Pride. So talk about, I guess, the give and take for you guys professionally and inside of your relationship.
Man, it's been she's quite frankly stood in front of a media shower, not for me, from me.
Yeah.
All the broken pieces of me got thrown at her over the years. Um, and it it used to be more difficult for me to talk about the things that she went through. Now I never hit her, like not I never repeated those same patterns.
Yeah.
But she was around when I was exposed for the worst parts of myself. Um, when I was younger, it was alcohol, and I would talk a certain way, and I the what I saw in a relationship growing up. Keep in mind, I had two stepmoms, so that means I had a mom, stepmom, stepmom, right? So there's three women that were pretty intricate parts of my life. My mom, I was three when she was killed, and so I don't necessarily remember her, but that was a chaotic time with her as well, even for me as a kid. So, it's definitely impressionable into my psyche and my brain and everything else. And so, my relationships and the relationships that I saw from a man and a woman, there was no trust there, none. And so here I meet her, and her upbringing is similar to yours,
Yep.
right? And that's a great thing. I'm trying to make a great upbringing for my kids,
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
but there are levels of distrust there, and it's only because of the what I saw that was normal to me. And that's not the only thing, but there was things that just spiraled out of control. And so I used to drink pretty heavily. I am hitting a year. I wouldn't even necessarily call it sobriety, but I read a book called Outwitting the Devil, and I already had a tap on my shoulder that like alcohol needed to be a part of somewhere else, not in my life. And so I made the decision to give it all up. Literally took it out of the house and gave it to a friend.
Yeah.
And so, but it was something that was shown to me early on, and so I kind of went down the same patterns, and it would take over, my being, if you will. I mean, I would be glossed over in a matter of a couple drinks, and so,
Yeah.
um, and she stood through it all. The difficulties early on in marriage, especially with finances, would come in, and we're working, and we're only making like $32,000, and all these different things. And she's, a vow and marriage meant something to her. To me, growing up, didn't mean, like, what does it mean, right? Like, it didn't mean much
Yeah.
to me from what I saw and the infidelity and all the different things that I saw. And so she stood in there. She stood toe to line and showed up and showed up and showed up and waited for me to catch up. And I'm greatly appreciative for her doing that and teaching me what that means, and giving me that perspective. And so the dynamic has continued to grow and allowed me to grow to where I can be a better husband, a better father, and a better leader, to where I can step into the role that I need, and I'm required to. I feel that required as like a kind of a man to do, and to where we have that healthy dynamic, right? And we still have healthy disagreements in front
Yeah.
of our kids, and we're two different human beings, but it's making that conscious choice to face um, those challenges and communicate through them. And if we make a mistake, if she does or I do, we don't take the other one out to the whipping post. and
Yeah.
put them on display. We work through it because we're two different
Yeah.
human beings with two different backgrounds, right? Um, and so she, a lot of people don't know this. When we launched Pride, I eventually got let go from Nutrex, and I had a great pay, company car, 100% pay for benefits. So we cut that, and we had two mortgages at the time because we hadn't sold our house in Texas. So we had two mortgages almost for a year. The newborn, she was a year and a half old, um, and we're running Pride off of one salary, and it wasn't
Yeah.
the greatest of salaries. It was okay, and she managed that. She was the breadwinner because everything I was doing, I was terrified to pay myself. I didn't know how to or what to, so I just put it all back
Yep.
into the business, and again, stood there and continued to work her ass off. And so it's a testament to her. She was a lifelong gymnast. She competed at OU, academic All American 4.0. I mean, I can go on and on, right? Um, but and I will. But and now we're at another stage in our life to where um, we get to exercise that ability to grind, if you will. Next year we are opening a an Apogee. It's Apogee OKC.
Okay.
It's a affiliate. Tim Kennedy?
Sounds really, really familiar. Like
He's
MMA, right?
Yep, yep.
Yep. Okay.
Special Forces Green Beret guy down in Austin. Him and Matt
Yep.
Boudreau started this Apogee umbrella. It's a young men's mentorship, fathers mentorship, women or mothers mentorship. They're going to get ready to do the young ladies mentorship program, age
Wow.
age variation, and they have weekly calls. They have calls with Alex Hormozy or Andy Frisella or all these different authors or entrepreneurs, you
Yeah.
name it. They pour into the dads so the dads can become better humans, husbands, fathers, leaders in their community. Obviously, we have something going on in this time and maybe this in the country where men need to step up and be stewards and good leaders,
Definitely.
and so that's kind of the push of it. But they have Apogee Cedar Park. It is a Socratic based learner led education school, private school, and we are starting the Oklahoma City affiliate next September. And so
Wow. I had no
um,
idea.
yeah, she will be. We're in our 6th week of training. We've got the apogeeokc.com. We got the Apogee Oklahoma City social media, and we're gonna have our first meetup with the parents, potential parents, um, and they're building out. They're using the same CRM that we do, that you guys do. They're
Hmm.
using that for the back end of the website and all these different technical stuff. But there's a whole team, and it's to disrupt the current education conveyor belt system
That's
that
awesome.
is just not working. It's not working for where we are. It worked great for the industrial revolution,
Yeah.
but it removes, it takes away that spark, that light from the kids. Doesn't doesn't help flourish and all these crazy words, big words. But so yeah, she's going to be the tip of the spear for that Apogee OKC here.
That's so cool. And she's absolutely gonna crush that. 100%. But I had no idea. I knew you guys were involved with them in terms of like going to like the meetings and everything, and we'd mentioned that in terms of like some partnerships and everything with Pride. But that's super cool that you guys are taking action and doing your own affiliate with it, and you're making it local too, which is super cool.
Got to make it is not enough to just highlight, call out, or complain about a problem, right?
Yep.
Especially when you become a father, you feel more of an action to have an impact on the environment because that environment is going to be the environment that your kids live in,
Yeah.
that they thrive in, that they flourish in, that they potentially a partner of theirs, right? Like, and so you got to take responsibility.
Absolutely. That's inspiring, man. That's really cool. Speaking further on being a father, being a dadpreneur, right? One of the things that we talked about with Kevin Wilhite and I, he had a lot of great things to say about you, but um, he's mentioned this, Mike has mentioned this, Alfonso has mentioned this, that they look to you as being kind of like the blueprint as far as setting boundaries between, work and your personal life and making sure that you show up as the father that you need to show up as. I mean, even perfect example, this particular podcast, this particular scheduling, this meeting, we had to wait, and you were very blunt with me up front. You were just like, hey, this is this is my situation. I got to wait until the missus has some time to either cover for me with the kids, or we've got something else figured out, and I'll hit you up. And I'm just kind of, from my perspective, I'm like, I totally get that, but I'm like, I might or might not hear from Shaun on setting this thing up. And sure enough, like literally right before I was about to record Kevin's podcast, you had texted me, and he was, so we had been talking about you, and he was like, dude, Shaun's going to be an awesome guest, and he's going to have some great things to say about being a father, which you have. But talk about that shift for somebody that's going to be entering that realm in the next couple of years. Talk about that shift between as you became a father, what that looked like early on as an entrepreneur, a father, and these other things that you had going on.
First off, it's very. I've had to work on accepting those compliments, and those are three guys, four including yourself, but that I respect, and I'll gladly take those compliments. They're not easy for me to do. You'll probably see
Yep.
I look away. I want to, whatever. I don't want to feel those emotions, right? Because they do
I'm,
bring up emotions.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, but it is 100% what there's intention behind that, right? I have intention, and it's being seen from my peers and the people that I respect, and so that's a good thing. I want that, and
Yeah.
but there's a quote that goes around that I think I've seen it before. The only people that will remember uh, the late nights or the overtime that you put in will be your kids, right?
Yep.
Nobody else will remember. Now, when you're an entrepreneur, it's a bit different. Especially when you're trying to make a generational impact, um, and there is just quite frankly nobody else to man the ship, right? Like
Yep.
it is a little bit different. It is a little bit different, but it's not entirely different. And the reality is, yeah, I want to do this from. I want to provide a life where we can make memories with my kids. I don't want to give them everything I didn't have. I want to give them the characteristic traits that that I've had to develop later in life. I would like to give them the opportunity to develop those early. If I'm going to give them anything, I want to give them the right environment so that they can become whoever they want to become.
Yep.
And it's not the things. Now, memories I do want to create with them. They're just they're not physical things. There are
Yep.
certain physical things, sure, but they're more so things that I have to be present and conscious in order to
To
give
pass
them.
on.
I
Yep.
have to exercise them myself in order to give them. And so it is a difficult spot because there's that same part of me that excelled in bodybuilding and got the trophies and won and had success, that I'm like, all right, I can go into a dark hole with this and just come out and like pride's big and it's global and all these great things,
Yep.
but I have to sacrifice. But now in the position I am, I see what that sacrifice has to be, and I'm just not willing to do it. I'm not, right? Because
Yep.
the life that my mother lived that led to her demise, and the life that my father lived that led to the position where we were in, he made those choices. He paid the price as a father. I paid the price as the kid, right? Now, down the road, here I am. I can make a choice to live a certain life. Now, it's not going to be the same, right? Negative things and out the bars, or, you know, um, shooting up in heroin, doing all these drugs, whatever it is, right? But the main thing, the common denominator is absence, right? I don't want to be absent. Who's going to guide them if I'm absent? Because I can be there and still be absent. We have these things that have just transform us to another dimension, even if I'm in the same room.
Yeah.
And so I don't. I mean, John was a great example of what, at least to me, maybe this to other people not, but at least from what I saw, he was a great example of what a father should be and could be. I don't know where this like, it's opposite of what I was shown.
Yeah.
But the pull and the love that I have for my kids and my family, I think maybe it comes from a not wanting to have, not wanting to understanding, not wanting to look back and like know that like if I made this choice, I would have regret. I would have right because any investment I have into my family, I've never regretted any of it, whether it be
No.
time or resources. There's not been any. I've regretted continuing to put money into strawberry banana, even though I love the flavor. It just doesn't sell very well. People love it, but it
Yeah.
doesn't sell. Like, damn it, I should have cut that 3 years ago,
Hmm.
right? Like, I can have those or moving here or there, but like when it comes to the family, any time, effort, it's always something to be learned there or just memories to be made. Um, but I hope I answered the question.
No, you did. You did. You absolutely did. It's something I struggle with, and I'm obviously not a father yet, but me and Mike and I, we went out to an event out in California 2 weeks ago, I guess it was now. Paid a bunch of money to be there, and there was a conversation that I was having with Kinsey, with my wife, the night before, where we were talking about, she was upset, and rightfully so, that I had been working so hard and now I was going to be gone for a few days, and it was coming up on our 6 month wedding anniversary, and so many of these things were kind of like happening in it, and I'm like, hey, I had told you that I'm going to have to do this for a while. Like, I'm going to have to, buckle down and do my thing, and then I'll come out on the other side. But like, we were just kind of having that conversation, and I didn't feel super great about it. And I got down there, and the event, a big chunk of it was like doing some inner work. And so I talked about something that had kind of been heavy on my heart, and it was that conversation, and just the how I kind of like felt that like misaligned with that a little bit. But it's also something like I really resonate with what you're talking about, of you being able to go into a dark place, like into a hole, and just like execute at a super high level and only focus on one thing, get super selfish, and just laser in on accomplishing this thing that you think you need to accomplish. And one of the first things that the guy said to me was, I told him about that, and he was like, well, did you ask her what she wants? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, did you ask her if she wants you to work hard? And I was like, well, I'm doing this for her. I'm doing this for us, like for the future. And he's like, does she want you to do that right now? Did she say that she wants you to work hard so that you can provide a crazy future? Or does she want to spend time with you right now? And that completely just like cut right through me. Like one of the exercises we had to do was film a video and send it to, like, basically fill somebody else's cup. So I start filming, I press record, and it's this beautiful morning in California. We're on the beach, we're working out, I got the endorphins going, and I'm like just showing her like, Kins, look at the view here. And I start to kind of like talk about that conversation, and I just broke down crying, just broke down. And it was all of that kind of coming to the surface, right? Of, they didn't, like, your kids didn't, you could go do all those things, right? But your kids didn't ask for that. If they had the choice between like daddy being here and doing all these things with them, and getting to drive a nicer car when they turn 16, like, they're gonna choose, like, 10 times out of 10, dad being here and getting to have fun with them and hang
They
out
want me
and
to read a
paint
book.
his trophies and that type of thing.
They want me to read a book. Just play with me. That's
Yep.
it. Time at the purest form. That's such good
Exactly.
advice for that he said for your wife. I'm glad you had the opportunity to get it, and so early
Yeah.
on. Whether it's society standards or internal genetic code of standard of a man to provide, we make these assumptions that like this is what, and like and some of it, this assertive part of it, like we're gonna go and accomplish or go get the kill to bring it back because she's not telling me she's hungry, but in 2 days if she doesn't eat anything she's gonna be hungry, damn it, so I better go get
Yeah.
this elk, right?
Yeah.
And so some of it's genetic, some of it's society standards, and some of it's social media. We see everybody's wins, right? We see everybody's wins, and so we better go win. But what is a win and what is success? And so, um, one, there's a book that I love to go back when I'm going through difficult situations or conversations or decisions. It's the Four Agreements. You've read that
Yep. I
one?
read it.
Yeah. So don't make
Yep.
assumptions. You're assuming that she wants, right? The
Yeah.
biggest thing in a relationship, any relationship, specifically a marriage, is communication and asking her, right? So like now, with the business, both the kids, my wife. So my wife is not sleeping as well, and she's taking the brunt of it at night. And every 3 to 4 hours, she's pumping because he's still
Yep.
breastfed. And so throughout the night, she's still pumping. And so she'll feed him, pump, and then he'll wake up again. And so she's a year actually. And when you're super pregnant, you're not getting any sleep, right? Because you're not comfortable. And so here we are, and I had this realization, like, what can I do better for our relationship? And so, what does she need? So at night, I could be diving into more Amazon. I could be diving into more figuring out forecasting and this, that, and the other. Right? There's a lot. There's a lot that I could be doing on my relationship with my business.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked my wife, "What do you need? Do you need me to work on your feet? Do you need me to work on your shoulders? Do you want to sit down?" And we've been on this kick of watching Tom Segura, fucking hilarious, and
Dude, Two Bears One Cave is one of my favorite podcasts of
so
all
good,
time
dude.
right now.
So good, man.
It
And
is.
so we have a date tonight. I said, I had something that built up some emotion to me, and I said, I really just need you to kind of rub on me. She's like, it's a date. So tonight, right? Like, that's our time. But communicating, asking her what she needs. Because your wife married you. She's confident that you're going to go execute, you're going to get the elk,
Mm-hmm.
but not at the expense of her, not at the expense of
Yeah.
y'all's time together. And so you can do all. That's the thing that when you start to realize you can do all the things that you still want to do, but you got to take a little bit of time each day and invest in that relationship jar.
Yep.
But not assume it's this, not assume it's that. Ask them, what do you need? They might just want you to sit there, as crazy as it is. And it's not, it's foreign to me, those healthy relationship, those healthy,
Yeah.
things. It's completely foreign to me of the past. But okay, what do you need? And really genuinely concern, what does she need? It might just be to do nothing, sit down. It might be let me go to sleep, and whatever it is. And it's been like right now, um, and I hope I can always say this, but our relationship has continued to grow and get in a better, it's a better place to where we both
That's amazing.
understand, communicate, despite having differences and challenges. We can come back to this. Like we can go away, but we can come back to it really quickly and be on the same page.
That's amazing. Well, I've got one final question for you, man. It's something I ask of everybody on the Bamcast is, what are you, Shaun, going to accomplish by any means necessary?
By any means necessary, will to how can I put it? You've seen the pictures and the memes and the gifs or whatever they're called of like the it's like a silhouette, but it's like a dad with a shield and the kids underneath it,
Yep.
right? That's me, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
and what it is, it's life's bullshit and it's all my bullshit, and I'm stopping it at all. It stops with me, right? And that's not just my kids; it's specifically my family. But as I evolve and I continue to grow, my desire is to put more people, to put more things, to put as much as I can under that shield, and to shield more from that, from life's BS. And that's not shielding them
Yeah.
and saying that we live in a rainbow and butterfly
Yeah.
environment. That's not it,
It's
because we
not. It's
don't.
not putting them in a bubble by any means.
It's not. It's giving them the tools to recognize and to work on and through life's chaos, because it's just going to be chaos. But at the same time that it's chaotic, it's freaking beautiful, man. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. So, by any means necessary, I will continue to be that shield and put more under that for my family, for my kids, for myself, for my inner child, however you want to say it, right?
I love that, man. Well, from my perspective, this has been an absolute blast, man. I want to thank you for coming on here, for sharing so much of your story, being so vulnerable, and just showing up how you've shown up here, and just how you show up every single day. And so, I want to make sure that you do hear and understand how much of an impact that you've had on me, on several of the people that have come on so far, and on so many others around you, because it truly is inspiring watching seeing how introspective you are, seeing how you approach problems in the world, seeing where you've come from and where you are now. It is awesome, and it's all inspiring. So I want to give you your flowers on that, man, and just thank you for letting me poke and pry and try to extract some stuff from that big beautiful brain of yours
Yeah,
as
man.
well.
Happy to. Hope I didn't bore anybody to death. I went on a few tangents, but I appreciate the compliments. I work towards being a person who can receive them, and I'll continue
Yeah.
to do so. So
All right, man. Well, hopefully we'll be able to have you on here again soon. But thank you for your time today, bro.
absolutely, my man.
If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed my conversation with Shaun as much as I did. If you want to share the show, even if it's just a timestamp that you share with somebody else, like I said, that's the way that this is going to grow. So if they don't get something out of this episode, hopefully they will get something out of the previous episodes before this. And hopefully it can help them to learn, grow, and evolve as well. If you want to support any of my businesses on a deeper level, or if you want to get engaged with any of Shaun's businesses and the things that he has going on as well, you can find all that in the description. And thank you guys for supporting the show. I'll see you in the next episode.